the meeting to order, being 5 o'clock. So, did everybody have a chance to read the minutes?
Yep.
For the last meeting?
Yep. Make a motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sign the bills. I want to get through most of this stuff here, and we got here in the beginning so we can get on to the rate setting, but Wayne's got
5 days.
5 days
I think that's
to
allowed.
carry over.
Yeah.
Wayne wants to carry over 5 days of his vacation time into next year. Does anybody have any problem with that?
No.
Okay, we have to take a vote on it, I suppose.
Make a motion to allow Wayne to carry over 5 days.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Better than having to take them off and
I'd love to see it.
with what's going on right now. With all this.
Well, it's all coming together.
That's why you need to be. It does.
It hasn't been easy.
Little information there about the composting that's going on.
All right, so I left you a little sheet. So that composting is up. He's not. I think he's hired an engineering firm. I think he's gonna ask for a variance. I think he has to go before the zoning board of appeals first, who I think kicks it back to the planning board because it's in the water resources. I don't think it's a good idea for that to be there. Besides PFAS, I noted a lot of vegetation in this thing, like he's getting stuff from a nursery or something. That has a lot of things that you don't want in your water resource protection.
Right.
And there was actually vegetation growing out of his pile, which means it's super saturated with, nutrients and pesticides. That's bad. But you guys are my boss, and before I sent anything off, I just wanted you to see what I was gonna send off, so there's 2 sides to the thing. I gave a little thing that says, one side that we don't want him to have the variance or any variance.
Yeah,
And
so
it's residential, so he can't, and what
Well,
he's
he
doing.
shouldn't be there anyways, it's residential.
Right.
He should, but that's the first thing. Second thing is, if it's in the recharge area, we just don't want it there, so just tell the Board of Appeals that
Right.
It's a bad idea to have it, and we're totally against it.
Right, I just wanted to run it by you first, I didn't want to go off cowboying on my own.
You guys want to go into the Board of Appeals when they have a hearing, or do you?
I looked, I couldn't find a scheduled hearing, I saw previous ones, but I
Really?
couldn't find, there are none scheduled, so maybe they wait for somebody they just don't have them unless somebody's.
Or did you say they're just hiring an engineer, maybe they're not ready to go into it?
Yeah, well, I know the engineer was here because they hired, because they wanted to locate our wells so that they could show that they were so far away it didn't affect it. And I'm like, no, you're in my recharge. We own everything in the 400 in the zone 1. We just don't own all of the zone 2 because it reaches into Brockton, into that one piece of property in West Bridgewater. So he's not, I don't think he wants to go away because he's snuck this thing in there. And he can't slide, I don't think he can slide it over
Have you
into
talked to
Brockton.
Brockton at all?
I talked to a city councilor over there that covers that ward, and she knew him by name, and she hadn't had any concerns, she hadn't smelled anything. She kind of got concerned though when I said, well, the DEP lady's been here for smells, and she's been covering complaints from, oh, really? I'm like, so, and we smelled it the other day, so either he did something with the pile, it's probably not until you turn the pile over or do something.
Yeah, you disturb it, it kicks the smell.
Right, and you can smell it right away. I'm like, I don't really care, I don't wanna get involved in politics, but I thought I'd reach out to her and,
Okay.
Okay, let us know if you see that comes up.
Yeah.
They're gonna have, that they're going before ZBA or planning board. either way.
alright, I'll watch. I'll actually add into the letter to them to notify us should it come before their board or the planning board. Cause I'm gonna send it to both the planning and the
If you see it come up, you should go to the meeting too.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I'm around here, I'll go to the meeting if I know about it.
Yeah.
Alright. So, now we're at water rates. Oh, wait a minute, I wanna just ask you, I see all the signs all over town about the water ban.
We're not
How's
having
that
fun
going?
times, so we've handed out a few violations and they get kinda nasty. They wanna know who's turning them in. And I can tell you, I'm not gonna have any dealings with residents. I had one dealing and I was jumping a 7-foot fence and I was threatening people. What he didn't realize is I had a witness standing right there watching me knowing I didn't jump a 7-foot fence. And the same person, I let him off that time and he violated again and still doesn't understand why he's getting violations.
People continuously call though.
Yep, and it's like you,
So
they're writing up
people are
there.
turning people in.
Yeah. so
Yeah,
many
well, there
calls
are two
today.
people that are really bad and they're right near each other. And they violated continuously through the whole thing, even when the regular ban. So it's not, and I can tell, you can tell looking at lawns, I'm not looking at you, Dylan, but you can tell looking at lawns who took to the ban and who didn't. And a lot of residents ignored the ban in totality. Once again, that Levigny guy, he's gonna pass his resolution that you have to follow them. When the state does a drought, you're gonna be mandated to follow their regulations. And if he's mad enough to do this, then he's mad enough to start watching your water use. Like you could see, we go from 400 to 500,000 gallons, all the way up above 1 million in the middle of summer. So they know what you're doing, because I've turned in monthly chemical reports, so they see our usage and they see the end of the year reports. So what will come of it will be up to them, not me.
Are there any fines or anything in the thing that he's
So that was
proposing?
the grassroots it's not part of Mass DEP, but there's the part of the people that are part of the permitting are looking at civil fines for it. Whether they'll be able to get it past the Mass General laws or not, I don't know. And it'll be funny to see who hands out those fines, because if it's a mass civil fine, I don't know who collects it or who even enforces it.
All right, well, I guess we'll, now open the discussion to the, rates.
Okay, so I just first have just a little bit of administrative. We have these forms here, which is for the asset management grant portion. So this is the final reimbursement and it needs 3 signatures. So if you're prepared to sign those, I can also leave them if you want to review them and scan them in the back, but DEP is like hot to trot to get this closed out. So we would just ask that we try to get the signatures.
You okay with
this week.
signing right now?
This is the stuff we've already had, this is just the final signatures?
Yeah, so you've reviewed this and signed this at the 50%
Yep.
point, when you got your first reimbursement. This is the second half. So this is just a summary of what was, spent. So there's one signature on the cover. It shows what we requested the first reimbursement. We're asking them to reimburse you $12,000. And then there's just all of the backup. So, our invoices, all the costs you incurred. So it's a lot of paper just to say, this is what the $12,000 is paying for. Then this is just for the match portion. So we just worked through, you guys have been participating in this. It's not like we just did a report. We've been here for workshops. We've done multiple levels of review. And so this kind of just summarizes, what you guys have put into it to show them that, you've been invested in the project as well. So this is just a signature saying that this is, a good summary of the work you've done. And then this is just the completion certificate, saying that the project was completed. So that's this. So
I think it's Rick who gets to sign it.
Yeah, say that's, not all of us, sign 3 signatures
Right, I
on
think-
it, just,
Yeah.
I think it's.
And like I said, if you need a little time, that's fine, but we just ask if we can try to get it.
I did look
This
it over,
week.
but I was confused when I saw all the invoices. I'm like, all right, because I had a lot of things going on today, so I'm like, all right,
did you look at the hours that he was mentioning?
yeah,
That part,
and
that
I,
look reasonable?
yeah,
Yeah, so our invoices are in there for their records. This is not us submitting for you to pay us these
Right.
invoices. That would be
Yeah.
done separately. Many of which I believe have already been submitted, paid, and, they just require you to get to milestones before they, 50%,
Yep.
100%, they don't want you submitting a reimbursement every time you spend a dollar. So
So
it's
wait
usually
until the
catch
end.
up, so by the time we're submitting this, we've probably already paid those invoices. And then, do you mind if I connect my laptop up
No,
to the
go
computer
ahead.
and share? I can go in as much or as little detail as you guys
Well, we'll
want.
see how it goes and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, so,
You wanna just set it up in front of you over there and?
oh, will it reach?
Yep. Probably on the hard drive, so.
So first, I'm just gonna quickly review kind of the overall process, and then I'll pull up the, the spreadsheet. And depending on how, if I'm the only nerd here, we'll have some fun with spreadsheets. But if you'll recall, we started with a review of your existing rates. We then went through the capital improvement projects, and these are all projects that we identified through the asset management program. Technically, this is a little bit above and beyond, but I think we talked at length last time that we didn't feel a rate study was a good use of your time unless we took into account the majority of your future spending. So the one thing I just wanted to pull up and show is, the estimated construction versus the cost with funding. And if you recall, there have been a couple discussions, probably a couple months ago now, where we talked about, there could be some funds available for ARPA, and there was another fund, I can't remember what it was. If it was also ARPA, or if it was another.
So the ARPA was got, I think the short term for Manly, which is gonna be paid for with ARPA and another
That's one I love.
I will use that.
match plus us, I think, so
Okay.
it won't be, it'll be paid in full.
Okay, that makes sense, because I think that's what we show.
Yeah,
Because if you look at here, that's the 0 with the 4, that's what it's showing, is that we're not showing it hitting the rates because it's, funded currently. Whereas all the other ones have some component, either partial or full, that would, we are considering a future cost that needs to be funded. And we had to make some assumptions, and mostly what we assumed was that the construction projects would be subject to bonding, whereas, the smaller design ones could be appropriated. So those are some of the, assumptions that I think should be revisited between now and any formal changing of your rates. Oops. This, if you recall, we went over, I think with Wayne, but this was probably 6 months ago now, but we went over the budget, we projected out based on things that were being paid off between now and the next 5 years. We assumed, we may have to make some assumptions about some of your budget items. If we had 3 years of data showing that the costs were rising, we assumed they were going to continue to rise. On the other side, if we saw costs decreasing, we just held them flat. We didn't assume that anything was ever going to continue to go down. So we think what we landed at was a pretty conservative review of the budget. But again, it's something that we'd want to go through line item with you to update, because I think, we have another year of probably true budget numbers since we did that study. So before, again, finalizing a rate program that you roll out to the public, we think that's probably another thing we take a closer look at. I think this we can get into, I can describe a little bit better in the spreadsheet, but as you may recall, we tried to stick to your existing rate structure in terms of not redoing it from scratch, but you have a base quarterly rate, you have an allowable excess, and then you have an excess rate. And so we built on that as opposed to kind of going to a true tier system, rates system that you might see other communities use. But what we did is we added a super excess, and we can play with that a little bit, because I think that's one of those variables that we might settle on something different before you roll something out. And so what it all came down to was, when you look at the overall impact, depending on the category, you'll see rates are going up, substantially under this scenario. Your typical resident who's using the Mass Water Works, recommended 55 gallons per capita, they're seeing a increase of, 33%. But if you're a resident who's using, well above what we consider to be, typical usage, you could see your bill double. And then if you just go down the line, you see most of the other categories are in, the 20-ish% increase. And this is all, a pretty large increase that, can be a bit of a shock. But this number right here is kind of why we thought it would be helpful to come in and show you the spreadsheet, because on the surface, what this indicates is that a large percentage of your new revenue, above and beyond what you currently collect, is tied to usage. In an ideal world, you're getting the vast majority of your revenue out of the base. But what I want to show you in the spreadsheet is that if you put it all in the base, then all of a sudden, instead of your highest users having 100% and everybody else being 20 to 33, what it's going to show is all of these numbers are going to go up to allow this to come down. And so then it just becomes, philosophical, I guess, discussion on, what type of rate structure matches, your philosophy and what you want to sell to the public.
Overall, do you know about what percentage of the overall budget is covered by the base rate?
Yes, I'm going to show you that in the spreadsheet. Because it's not as high as we would like, which is why we wanted to mention it. All right, so just to give you a quick tour of what we're doing. So this is a simplified version of the spreadsheet that we use to conduct the study. And this is small and it's a lot of numbers and you don't have to necessarily worry about it. But what this has is an entire year of billing data. And then what we did is recreated your bills using your rate structure. So in other words, I think when we got the billing data, we got, customer, the category, their usage, and then the actual bill. And then what we did was calculate the bill to show that everything was matching up. So that was the first step, was to prove that the spreadsheet was working. And then we did a bunch of different scenarios, which I've hidden most of them now, kind of working across to say, depending on which scenario you did, it recalculates based on that real usage what that bill would have been that year. And then up top, you're kind of seeing what the resulting revenue would be. And because it's hard to see, I'm going to switch over to another spreadsheet, another tab. And what you'll see is we have those same service types, and then we have what we proposed as your new rate, and then this is the existing, and then here we're just kind of showing you what changed. So as we play with this tonight, we can do a couple scenarios in real time where maybe we get rid of this super excess, increase the base. What this is going to allow us to do is quickly see how much this is going up, how much this is, etc. And then it all rolls up over here to show essentially what we have now is $1.7 million in revenue based on those billing records, with about 38% of that being in the base, and the the remaining 60% being a result of excess charges. One thing to note, it doesn't impact the spreadsheet, but when we compare, compare our revenue to our budgets, we are assuming that the sprinkler fees are gonna hold steady. But that's one of those, philosophical discussions you can have if you feel, like the sprinkler revenue is not enough. You can, we can change that here, and then it kind of reset how much of the revenue we're trying to get out of the rates. And so this spreadsheet is kind of showing all that budget information annually, and then we say, okay, well, what's the worst year? So this is just the max annual budget, because it kind of goes up and then it kind of goes down as, new loans are coming on and old debts are coming off the books. It's not, I think our highest is the almost $3 million. So when you take out your, roughly $300,000 in, anticipated sprinkler revenue, we're chasing 2.7. And this is just showing that in the past, you're getting 1.7. So we're showing we now have $970,000 of additional revenue we need to generate. And so this is just the same analysis with the structure we pulled together. So the budget is the same, but now sprinkler is the same, but now we're showing a surplus of about $40,000 per year. And then the last thing we looked at was kind of the burden on connection type, because as you know, right now you guys have done a good job of balancing the revenue to who's demanding the water. So for example, 81% of the water pumped is servicing residential customers, and you're taking, you're getting 81% of your revenue from residential customers. So that's showing that it's well balanced, and so we try to, not stray too far from that. And you can see we didn't quite hit a bullseye, and I guess if we were in the stage where we thought we were close and we were fine tuning, then maybe we could, just tweak a couple things here and there to get it more in line. But I think for all intents and purposes, 3% difference is, it shows that we've a reasonable balance, and we're not putting undue burden on one. We're not asking the residents to do more than their fair share of the revenue. Does that make sense? Okay.
Did you change the sprinkler fees?
We did not, so we just held that steady
Okay.
for the purposes of this.
Good. Because that kind of gets adjusted to the cost of the mortgage on the tank and the mortgage that's tied to the painting of the tanks.
Mm-hmm.
Because we bill the industrial customers, 2/3
Yeah.
of our maintenance of the tanks. So that goes to any industrial or business that has a fire sprinkler system. And then the residential customers pick up the other third.
Okay. I think that's a reasonable approach.
Because, and the reason why, how we came up with that is that without the fire sprinklers for the industrial customers, their fire rates go sky high.
Mm.
And they get a savings where the tank, the residential customers don't get a savings that much on their residential fire policy, but the industrial customers benefit greatly with it.
Yeah.
So we go 2/3, 1/3.
So I guess that kind of ends my tour of how we got to where we are. So, I mean, are there any questions on the approach before we start hopping in and, I guess, playing with some numbers?
The one thing that jumped out when you had your list showing, you know, where you added in the super excess, you were showing an allowable super excess?
Or
Yeah.
that's where they hit
It's
it.
just, that's like, essentially, yeah, it's probably not the best terminology, but we're just
That's
saying,
why,
you know, up to the first excess, they're paying just, you know, their typical base rate. And then once you're above that, you're paying an additional fee on just the amount of usage above that. So the super excess pays the same. And if you look.
so you're not
it's-
giving them, because just reading it, it was like, okay, they're in the excess, and if they go over it, now they get free. before
Yeah,
they hit
it's
the
poorly
super
worded,
rate.
yeah.
Okay.
So what we're saying is if they're
That's
using
not
more than.
Opposite, yeah.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite of that. If you're
Okay.
over that, you're getting, everything over that essentially is getting charged
Yeah,
again.
that, no, that made sense, it
Yeah,
was just
yeah,
the
it's
way it
poorly
was
presented.
presented. All right.
Yeah. It's a fair question.
You know what we're gonna have with that problem, people who get a water leak, and they don't know about it, and then they go into super excess, then their bill goes way up, they're gonna be in here crying because they didn't know that they.
But I
had a
thought
leak.
about that, but if they come crying, then you go to their house and look, all right, does he have a sprinkler system? If he doesn't have a sprinkler system, then truly he didn't put it out on his lawn, but however, you just, like, I lived in Brockton and you pay both ways, and when I forgot I was watering my garden for 3 days, yeah, I paid a price. But it was my fault.
No, I'm just saying, you know, they come down here, you know, crying
Yep.
that it was a leak, and I didn't know that. Because it's gonna be blasted at them with a much bigger fee than, it's bad enough
I get
when,
yelled at.
when they get our excess rate, when they get this super rate, then they'll really get.
Well, I try to tell people, like, I get yelled at a lot when we go out for leak detectors. The first thing I go after is the toilet, and it's poor wording, but the old timers usually, don't tell me that, you always tell me, but the toilets can waste a lot of water that you don't see. You can run 7 gallons a minute
the
through the
septic
toilet.
system. Yeah.
Done.
Easily. And you don't see it, you don't hear it, and like my mother wouldn't hear anything, and it could be pouring all over the place and she'd never know it.
Now, don't throw her under the bus.
But it's just, I know, and they get
No,
mad
I
about it.
had the same, I had a bill came in, and it was way off.
Yeah,
Knew I wasn't using the water.
Right.
That's exactly what it was the toilet.
and it's silent, and it's deadly though, because you don't find it.
I went to a house one time, that woman had a really big bill. She answered the door, and standing there, the bathroom was right near the door. And she says, I have a big, huge bill, and I don't know where and they say they got a water leak. I don't know where that water's going, and I don't understand it. I said, did you just use that bathroom? She goes, no, I don't use that one.
You could hear.
I go, well, it's
No,
running.
it's running.
She goes, I don't hear it. I go,
Usually, you get into the house and you hear it right
Oh,
away.
yeah.
They don't hear it, but we hear it right
They're
away.
used to it a lot of times, you
Yeah.
don't hear the background noise.
Yeah, she was elderly, and so she said she had a plumber in to fix it one time, and she said it shouldn't have a problem. I called the plumber myself, explained it to him. And he came out and fixed it again.
I've replaced flaps
She was just
before, and they
elderly,
still
and she
leak,
couldn't
that's
hear
when I just rip the
anything.
toilet out
Yeah.
and change the toilet, because it's
No, I'm the same way. I can't hear anything either.
I mean, it's the only other thing I want to say. I was just running some calculations to make sure I had the numbers right. But if you look at, 4,000, cubic feet, you're talking 30,000 gallons in a quarter. So even if you assume, 2.5 people per connection, that's 133 gallons per capita day.
Do we
Like,
know-
that's excessive. That's not, typical residential usage. So it's not like we're trying to make. I mean, that's why we're calling it a super excess. It's because it is well above and beyond what you would expect residential usage to be.
right.
The issue is, and I think this is kind of why we talked about coming in and playing with this in real time, is like if that is behavior that you're looking to correct and you correct it, that's a loss of revenue. So That's the balance.
Oh, but as we were discussing before though, as this keeps going and they start pushing from the state side to be stricter and stricter on the drought management and on the water use restrictions, we're going to see less of that.
Yeah.
Because when that bill gets up, the people that are scofflawing
They're
the
gonna,
sprinkler systems and stuff, they're gonna stop. So we can't, it's fine to have it in, but we can't have it in to rely on it for revenue. It's really not something that you're gonna see an awful lot that we can just kind of hold in there.
Right. Yeah, and when we're talking rates of this amount, there could be, conversations also about, a progressive change. I mean, it'll be up to you, is it better to rip the Band-Aid off and have a massive change one year and then a reprieve, or are you gonna say, oh, if we have to go up 50%, maybe we have to spread that out over, 5 years.
right.
The issue is you don't wanna run a deficit between now and then either.
So do you, we've been into these projects and we're getting closer to finality. Any idea how long before construction, like the mainly short term will be paid for, so that's not
Yeah.
gonna hit anything, but the long term or the plant here, how many years out before that it begins?
So I think there are two different scenarios. So like, if we do this one first, if we're piloting over the winter, we would expect to then do, the pilot study report, which we would then submit to DEP. So we would be expecting to design that in 2023, if we can appropriate the funds for design, and then bid that late next year so that you have somebody ready to construct in 2024.
So if they began creeping like every 2 quarters, they began a slow creep, and any excess revenue starts going into articles waiting to pay for these things. It's not, we're going out and buying all sorts of new stuff. It's gonna begin to stockpile waiting, so that we get an idea, because there's gonna be a knee jerk. The residents are gonna, some residents will pull back and they'll stop using water, which suddenly you've got an increase, now you've got a decrease in revenue because they're gonna pull back.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the economy's gone to the crapper right now too, so everybody's bleeding everywhere.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you might have like a year and a half or 2 years before we're shelling out for things. Except for like to design and stuff, which shouldn't be in the millions for a design, I wouldn't think.
Design
But
will
it's
be
gonna-
millions, no. It's
Right.
usually, you talk, 7
No, I'm not
to
asking-
8%,
Yeah,
right? I think in all the cost estimates we've done for you, that's about what we,
Right.
estimate the engineering.
because
will
I
be.
think I saw a bid already for the short term. I think I saw that come by a while back, so you're all set there. I don't know if you've gone out to bid yet, but.
So we just got, I know we can get into updates on all the projects as we go along or at the end.
I know I spanned out here.
It's okay, just to answer that one, so for the short term, we just got feedback from DEP, not last week, but the end of the week before.
Yeah,
And we're putting together a letter response, just to correct some, what we think are errors in that. But at the same time, we are updating our plans and specs to go out to bid, because, we can't do that until we got DEP's comments. And their comments, we have some concerns with them, but they're not gonna impact the design, it's just more extra work for you,
right.
is what it really comes down to. They want, the sampling, and we just wanna make sure that, we're gonna draft a letter of things that stand out to us, but then have a conversation with you to make sure that you understand what you're agreeing to under this permit.
Like I'm gonna have to bite it, because PFAS samples are spiraling fast. I mean, all of my samples have, but they've climbed faster.
Yeah, this is like full distribution system sampling.
I'm hoping to avoid a lead and copper trigger. We're not changing our corrosion control any, and I'd wanna argue them on that one, because
Yes,
I had a
that's-
hard time doing the 20 samples I had to do. Beg, borrow, and steal from people, and I started early in the thing, and it took me almost the entire quarter to get them samples. So if they trigger it for a 40 sample base and quarterly, I'm gonna be in trouble, because people don't wanna comply, they don't wanna help you.
Okay.
So, and we're not really changing our corrosion control, at least not with Manley Street. So I
Agreed.
think we can argue that
And
one.
I feel like we explained that pretty well in the application. It still came up as one of their conditions.
And we're ahead because they're changing the lead and copper. I've been working with our GIS, Deborah, and we have an app already, so we're ready to go to send out to people with the Q things to have them start sending back to us. So we've been ahead, and hopefully I can get a lot of that in advance so that when we get to that point. But I don't think Manley Street shouldn't trigger it, and I'd like to argue with them on that one.
Agreed. Yeah, so we're putting together a letter, push back on that. I'm trying to remember what the other one is that we talked about internally that we took issue with.
I just know the guy was hot for lead and copper, like he was already trying to trigger me, and I'm like, whoa, slow down, buddy.
Yeah. But, yeah, so we'll work with you on that letter, but
Yeah.
I don't think we need to hold up. It's not going to hold up going out to bid.
Right. So the other thing is when Manley Street goes, it's gonna have to come offline, correct?
Yeah. But I think we can stay to minimize that to some degree. It's because I don't know if you recall, but the way we're
I know how it is.
constructing it,
Yep.
we're putting in all of these actuated valves. So right now, there will be a shutdown to get those in place, but I think we can stage the work. And
So
we
there'll
can-
be
we can-
like blocks so that we can continue, we can come back up again like a week or two once they're in place.
and we could probably get away with even less.
I know, but
Yeah.
it just,
But yeah, we can make them do that, come in overnight, put in the valves, and then, to kind of make, so that you're not down in the
Yeah.
middle of the day. Because it's just when we have to pull the piping apart and put it back together differently. But I think in every location where we're taking it apart, we're putting in a valve. So if we can get them to overnight, take it apart, put in the valve,
I think we could survive, depending upon the time of year it occurred, we can probably survive. I mean, I know I've been telling you guys that we can produce water. The problem is I'm gonna blow mud into the system if I try to stay up with the volume of use, because everything's gonna come from this end. And I know, once Rick departed and I took over, I got hammered because the high school was happening. They were watering the thing. I had a landscaper illegally using our hydrants all over the place, so I got slotted with quality complaints. And I found out quickly how the water from this end goes and where my complaints will come from. And it won't be from the heavy users. It's the poor people in between that are gonna suffer the most.
I guess just to kind of close the loop on it since we're there. So the long-term, I think, design and construction, I think we can buy some time there, right? So we're seeing, unless something's changed from your last quarter, the results are still, within compliance.
So the last one came back, I don't have it off, I think it jumped up to 14,
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
but it's still under
But
20.
it's
It's
still
still
under
under
20.
20, yeah.
So we haven't, it's since,
We haven't exceeded.
yeah, since what,
We've
quarter
gotten a
three,
whole lot more rain, so, I can't pull it because it's down for rehab right now, so we'll wait and see. I don't know when I'm gonna get it back.
Yeah. So I think if we get this extra vessel in and the inflow numbers stay down, I think, we have to keep DEP in the loop, but I think we can kind of extend out that demonstration phase to kind of get us past some of the work here before we're looking to fund that.
Yep.
Or if the community is, can live with something between 10 and 20, knowing that your sampling is gonna stay where it is, maybe you can, at some point it might
Well, we'll
get
know
more
once it comes
stringent,
up,
but, you might be able to kick that can down the road a little bit if you continue to stay in compliance and you do have treatment, and really the only thing you're missing is that redundancy component. We can maybe push that out a little, even more than we showed here. Because again, we didn't want to, we're a little conservative, I guess is what we're trying to say, is because we don't want to raise rates and just be like, oh, that didn't work, right? Because we were too optimistic. So I think that's part of like the fine tuning of this is were we conservative anywhere that we now, like we're not gonna have as much overlap, for example. Okay.
That, and hopefully, I know they were pushing more, I heard more about pushing for principal forgiveness. Like, I think it came back again that they wanted more of the loans to go to principal forgiveness. So hopefully we catch that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the other thing too, is we were pretty aggressive in, going after the SRF funds.
Right.
When was that, August we did that, I
Yeah.
believe?
Yeah.
And that's when Jim actually emailed me and said, listen, it's an emerging contaminant, you want to go because you might get principal forgiveness.
Yeah, we put in multiple if I recall, we put in for the PFAS as well as the iron, so both sites.
Yep.
We put in what we think are, pretty good applications. And things that we think are scoring okay. So it's just a matter of what they prioritize this time around, because we've thought that in the past, and then they decided, oh, we're gonna give it all to communities who already spent the money, as opposed to.
What's the time in finding that out?
Good question.
I don't know if they just opened up and they're closing again, and then they'll,
Because, the deadline was, I feel like, the end of August. And it
That
usually is a
sounds
couple
familiar.
months. So it might not be till January that you hear back. I can find out.
I'm just thinking in terms of, could affect what we do on the rates.
But yeah, very much.
Right.
so.
What if, if we start doing stuff before that's gonna, before we're actually gonna have that hitting
Yeah.
for the SRF money, if we get it.
And then I guess since we're kind of talking about the super excess, the other thing we should look at is who are these top users who we're seeing have $20,000 water bills, and realistically, what happens is those accounts if we do this structure.
I pretty much know targeted areas to look at their bills to see who would go above. Did it give you any information on how many people would, on that one, would go into super excess?
I can get all of that data. I don't necessarily have all of that at my fingertips.
Yeah, that's okay. It's not,
But we
That
do.
would come out of the billing records, you'd have what the,
Yeah,
what they
like
use
we can
for, it's just a
we
matter
have
of filling it
filters.
out.
We can, we could show just the accounts that are over the super and get you a list of addresses. That's all.
What is the super start at?
4,000
Cubic
cubic feet. Which actually I can probably, it'd be here.
for the most part, you're not gonna jump in, well, there's pretty much one way you're gonna jump into it. Although this year swimming pools probably evaporated quite a bit too, so.
Oh boy. Yeah, so I can sort this by highest, and I can give you this. Madison R. And it is a little misleading because this is a quarter.
oh yeah, but they're gonna hit it by quarter anyway, it's not like they're gonna.
Yeah, there are 2 quarters when they'll tag it.
Yeah, that didn't work.
Roughly how many?
That's what I'm trying to do, but I just messed it up.
Just takes one flick of the thing, the next thing you've got the next column, the other column, and then you've sorted everything and mixed it all up.
Just overshot it. The problem is when there's so much data.
Yeah.
Was it, do you remember if it was all residentials or were there?
I don't know, so it looks like 1,000 records. So over a year. Yeah, that's,
1,000 customers fall into super excess?
Yeah.
What you're saying?
1,000 records, so that's bills.
And that's a
So
quarter.
that's a quarter, so maybe 200, if it was the same people every
So that's
time,
almost
it's like
half the people.
250.
It's the same people though, usually.
Yeah, so
How
is
many,
it 1,000 for the year?
2,700 customers, that's a third.
So
of
is it
them.
1,000 for the year or is it 1,000 for the quarter?
You're saying it's 1,000 for the
every
year?
quarter, right?
For, well, that's what I'm,
No, sorry, that's for the year.
alright, so you divide that by 4, so 250.
Per,
Well, or would you divide it
Well,
by
and like, it's also a little bit,
2 for the, it's only 2 quarters.
Yeah, it's only 2 quarters when they're actually gonna hit it, so probably about 5, yeah, about 500.
yeah, but you can see, it is a lot of repeat addresses. Like, the highest is Mass, MA Fieldwood.
Oh,
Oh.
that's,
trailer.
yeah, that's the park.
Yeah, so they're showing up, but they are in a different rate structure than
Yeah.
residential already. So that might be, you know, a case, we might have to look at how many,
Right, they're not,
we should make sure like they're proportionally the right amount, right? So like their excess might need to be more generous because they're spreading that excess over more. So
Right.
even though like it's kind of built into their,
they're 179
Base rate.
units.
yeah. So those, like there might be users like that come out of this
Special
that need to
case,
be
right.
different.
Yeah, but then that area shouldn't particularly have a heck of a lot of excess use either, though.
No,
They
they're-
shouldn't- yeah, there's-
he's looking, he, like I told you this earlier, he really wants to have meters in his own thing. I haven't heard back from him on that, but,
Well, as far as I'm concerned, he can do it as much as he wants,
Right,
as long
'cause
as we
it's
don't
him,
do it
right.
for him.
Yeah, a bunch of industrial, and those typically don't constrict, because it's probably for business purposes. So that, you know,
yeah.
Is this in order right now?
it is, yeah.
How much in excess would be like the top agricultural? Like how much would this affect farms?
So the farms don't actually use a lot. Like I put in 7
They
farms.
used to use our water for irrigation, but they don't anymore.
No.
We used to have field meters.
Yeah, the guy on 106 by Trukey's, he has his own wells.
Oh, okay.
Is that meter still there?
The meter is, the thing is still in the ground and he's never hit it. At some point, I hate to go and hear it, but we should dig it up and get it out of there.
Yeah, tapped right in the 12.
Yeah, and I don't want that breaking off.
Yeah, what agriculture is over on Manley Street? That's the only agriculture that pops up in,
Yeah, that number's too high though.
You can imagine, years ago, we used to irrigate the
It could be.
the agricultural fields around.
Right.
The farmers, they used it. And they used to get a discounted rate. And one of our biggest users was components. They used it to cool, they used to mold plugs, electric plugs, and they used to use the water for coolant for their machines. And their water bill, they used to get a reduced rate because they used so much water. When we went to the regular rate, they decided that they'd build a cooling tower, and they did, because it just got so expensive. But they were the biggest user in town at the time.
You know,
So they-
Shaw's corporate office was doing that for a while. They would like, their bill
Let me
was
see what the top.
enormous because they were doing.
Years ago, the ice makers, the compressors, they all used to be
Just
water
excess.
cooled.
I don't even know who it is.
They say they were really efficient, but they wasted a lot of water.
so 216 Spring Street. So these aren't all grouped together, actually. Oh, I might not be at the top of the spreadsheet.
No, I don't. Yeah, that's not.
411 West.
That's the condo complex. So they're big.
Well, then why would they be?
Yeah, they're all
built
individual
like-
units though. In individual meters. Somebody's filling their jacuzzi tub too often.
So that's looking at $1,000 in excess, those ones up there. Or super excess.
Either that or you got 3 toilets every day.
Oh, sorry. 2,800? These are, yeah, I mean, that's projected out to annual amounts, just to make it easy.
I'm just trying to get an idea of how much of a surprise bill people can get from what they're currently paying to,
Yeah, I mean, I would,
after this goes into effect.
yeah, I mean, I think what you might wanna do is like approach those customers before things go into effect even. And,
You could literally see right the neighborhoods that,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, we can run any
well, you send out warning letters and
reports you
say,
want to, if you want, you know. If you wanna list.
You know, you give them a water notification ahead of time.
yeah, like multiple mailings and tell them to look at their meter, run their system once through what they consider a regular cycle, and then you give them the computation to figure it out. If you just make it easy enough, either that or we put up an app for them to punch in. Once they figure out their usage, punch it into the app and it'll give them back a number, so it makes it really simple for them.
So right now, the spreadsheet is set up so that everyone gets the same super access. It wouldn't be a lot of work. I mean, more than I wanna do right now, live and in person, we will watch,
Yeah.
but, to, you know, change it per category. You know, so for example, it sounds like at the very least, we'd probably look at MA Fieldwood and give them a higher quarterly based on the number of units.
Right.
Right, if we're saying a one-family home gets you know, in excess of 4,000, and then you have, whatever you said, 100 people sharing that same 4,000, that's not equitable. So that might be, you know, a case where they're not charged that super excess.
There aren't many people that stay on, or just the basic.
Well,
No,
that's the issue we have right now is, you know, only like less than half of like, our revenue is coming out of base, so that
No.
means,
When you went to your proposed, you had said it was 38.62 with the existing for the base to excess. Did you bring that down with
It
the
actually-
adding the super excess? Made it worse?
it did end up coming down slightly, yeah, a couple percentage. That wasn't by design, that's just.
No, I
flushed
figured it
out.
wasn't by design, but just
Yeah.
as you add the higher rates to hit the number.
Yeah, so essentially, it was kind of an iterative process, as you can imagine, where like, the first approach, we just were way low on revenue. It's like, okay, well, you know, I think our first approach was how much, I think we probably, and maybe this is something we can play with now, but I think if you look at like the change to the rate, you know, we kind of started here saying like if you're residential property, you know, 1 unit, your current quarterly rate is 75, we went up $20 per quarter. That's, so people who aren't even hitting the excess, you know, their rate's already going up, you know, $20 a quarter, it's $80 a year.
Do you know what percentage of people that is? That just use the
Not that big.
base?
no, it's not like my mother by herself, she goes over, but that's because it takes like 3 gallons for her to get hot water.
No, I don't have that, I can get it for you, but what I do know is that people who use 55 gallons per capita day or less of water would see about a 33% increase. This, I don't understand why all of a sudden there's a dip for the next category of people, other than, because I guess you go up here and look at people who are using way more water, and that's, their bills start to skyrocket. So I'm not entirely sure what's happening between there and there. It could just be kind of a fluke.
Well, he's got more in the super excess at the higher rate, right, as you start jumping up.
Yeah, well, I guess I think the issue is that this category, this is before people are in the super excess. So this is people who are using 55 gallons
Yeah.
per day or more. This is people who are using, 100 gallons per capita a day. So they're still not triggering super excess. So that's why you're seeing that's blank. So even though they're paying excess, it's their bill isn't going up proportionally as much, but they're still being charged more than these people. They just had a lower increase in rate, if that makes sense.
What did you do to the excess rate from the beginning to the proposed? How much of an increase?
Yeah, it's on this tab. So,
You don't wanna-
so essentially, they're being charged an extra $1.25 per cubic foot, and they're getting 75 less cubic feet per quarter, is what this is showing.
So they should be seeing a jump.
And they are, their bill's going up 23%, so they're not getting a discount. It's just because the other people have more of their revenue tied to the base, and the base went up for
Yeah.
everybody. It's just, it created this weird thing where like that one category, their bills are still going up substantially, but like percentage wise, it looks a little weird. But I don't think it's because of a mistake in the structure. I think it's just kind of the way it flushes out, you know, until you start getting absolutely hammered with your super excess, you know, it's just a proportion of your bill that's base versus excess. And you're essentially being double taxed on that super excess, because you're paying the excess charge plus the super excess charge on everything above 4,000. So, you know, if you're above anything below, you're not getting charged for. Anything between excess and super excess, you're paying, what is it, $750? Anything 4,000 above, you're still paying that $750 in excess, but now another $750 in super excess. So it's, you know, a substantial increase if you're going with a super excess.
Well, that'll stop them from watering the lawns.
Well, that's the knee jerk that comes along.
Yeah. But the one thing I did want to look
But then if
at,
you're dependent on that revenue, that's not a good thing.
Right.
yeah,
Well, that's, if you start pumping slowly, you're gonna see the knee jerk and hopefully come around it, or,
so I guess if we want to, and then this is why I did this is a version of spreadsheet just specific tonight, so we can mess with numbers, but, you know, if we want to try to get, you know, the percent from the base up, I mean, the way to do that is to increase your base. It's like the only way to do it. So, I mean, if we just kind of zero in on, you know, single residential, you know, if the current quarterly rate is 75, oh, sorry, no, the current is 55, we're going up to 75. It's just, I mean, how much do we think we can, you know, stomach?
Well, but again, you're saying because you're doing that, but the reason you can do that is the revenue from the super excess. Like those numbers that hit a certain budget number at the end for revenue.
The super excess essentially was to make up we did three things. We increased the base rate,
Yeah.
but we did a more like soft approach to that, saying like, this is what it's gonna cost the average homeowner. Like, and $80 a year, you know, if you were looking at a cell phone, like it's one thing, but that's not what people expect to pay
Yeah.
for their water bill, right? It's just,
they don't wanna hear they're paying more for their cable and they're still paying for their water. They don't wanna hear that.
yeah. So, I think this was our stab, and this is why you saw a slight shift, and we try not to abuse it, but you know, it's a little easier for a business to stomach their bill going up $20 a quarter than a single family, right? So, you know, we had to kind of combat that to stay within that, you know, balance that I showed you on the results tab.
Now, do they, like, if you're gonna find out if you get principal forgiveness, will they let you know before you get into it, or you have to be into it?
You'll know after after they announce, because it would be part of your paperwork. So, you know, you get selected, it's your pre-application, you still have to do your actual loan application.
Right.
And at that point, you know, they have to disclose, you know, all the details of the loan. So at that point, before you sign up for it, you would know
Yeah.
what percentage is.
So you're well
Yeah.
into it before you find it out.
You won't know until you've been accepted.
Right. So we're well into, by then we're designed and just short of construction, and we're looking for our funding for construction.
For this site, yeah.
Yeah. Because if you get the rates ahead and we get principal forgiveness, It's kinda catch-22, you don't know
then
if
you
you're
can,
gonna
we
get
can
it or
always
not.
delay implement, if we plan on bringing them in every couple of quarters, if we
Right.
get that, and we get principal forgiveness, we can put off a
Right,
few quarters to let it catch back
yeah,
up. Whereas, as opposed to running short. But, I mean, what bothers me is we're going, the thing with this approach is it, even if it's only a little right now, it's getting away from the base covering. And we need the base to cover more, because the longer this goes, and if we start getting these droughts, and they start getting more serious about that water use restrictions, because we've been loose on that,
Yeah.
compared to what they could be making us do. We would be, the way this is set up, I mean, if you actually are hitting people with these huge bills, they are gonna cut it back. They'll be going around paying somebody to put in a well, and we're gonna lose the revenue.
Yeah.
There's no way they're gonna pay, you know, if the water bill starts to cost whatever for them to put in a well, they're not gonna continue to run those sprinkler systems.
DP's not gonna let that go unnoticed, though, they already know that, in a way.
Yeah, but that's different.
There'll just be a little lag before they catch that one.
I mean, I guess,
But it'll still, either way, it's still gonna knock down.
Yeah, it's gonna take
Revenue.
away from revenue.
So we need to get, even if we go up higher, maybe we increase the allowed excess on a higher rate, get the excess, I mean, you said went from 38 down a couple, say down to 36.
Yeah.
You're probably better off going up to 40, going up to 40, something like going up a couple percent into the base across the board. Even again, if we have to give a little bit extra excess, so at least we know we're getting the revenue,
Right.
and then hit them a little harder on when they go over. Because it's gonna end up biting us where we don't wanna be bit.
yeah, so if I get rid of the super excess and I make up the difference in the base, then you're looking about 39% are coming from the base. And you could still theoretically keep the super excess in there, and if people are using it, then that becomes a surplus. And if people, pull back on it, you're not reliant on it. And this is really showing 2.9.
That's when
So-
we used to raise the base rate, was because we were guaranteed the money.
Yeah.
When you raise the excess rate, you don't know what's gonna happen. You might get it more revenue, but you might not, because they just cut back. But if you raise the base rate, that's guaranteed money that you got to
We're
pay
paying
your debt.
we're paying our bills with bonus instead of with salary.
Right, which is honestly, our first approach was to do what I'm showing you now. So
Yeah, exactly.
we essentially did in the base, I mean, there's only 38% in the base technically, but now there's none in the super excess, right? It's all in base and excess. But you'll see, we went from 55 to 100 for residential. Multifamily went from like 68 to 150. So this is where we started from, because we agreed 100% that you want as much from the base as possible. But what kind of scared us off is you come over here and your typical person who's using 55 gallons per bill, their bill just doubled. And so that's the cost of having it come from the base, is that we're telling people they should be using 55 gallons per capita a day. That's a published thing. That's what the Water Management Act tells us is reasonable for conserving. And you see the bill about 94%. And maybe that is just the reality, but that kind of scared us off, that approach.
But when you look at the ones further down where it's going up a lower percentage, it's going up a lower percentage because they're paying more in the excess. They're billed on a dollar basis, they're still going up. The one who's only using 55, it goes up almost double, it's going up to that, say to 100. The ones who are using water, they're still going up to that 100 to start with. They're all paying the same amount for the base
Right.
usage, for what we give them for an allowable amount of water. It's not, I mean, the percentage is almost misleading in a way when you're using it like that. Because if you start balancing it, everyone's paying the same for
It's
what
the
they get.
girls and ladies room, I don't know why the thing, I'll turn the sensitivity down.
I understand what you're saying, I agree. I think it's.
But yeah, it's a scary number like that.
Well, I mean, in a multifamily, that's being, the idea is that is being spread out across multiple families. A business that's being, spread out to, however they're funding their business. So that it just, in terms of the impact of an individual, that's more what this is kind of showing. It's like, it's gonna feel more impactful to those, single family, especially the ones who right now don't hit the excess. They're to your point, they're gonna see the biggest increase because
Well,
it's all they're paying.
the users have subsidized the non-users for a long time. And it worked when you were allowed to produce as much water as you wanted. But the state's beginning to take that away.
So, I mean, this may just be an unavoidable path.
But now this is with no super excess. Is the way you have this one set up now?
Yeah. But, I mean, I think it's also a little bit misleading with the percentage in the base, because I think we actually run a slight excess in this scenario. Yeah, so we're running a surplus, because now we're getting, so when I had it with this lower, but the super excess in, it was like 2.7 million in revenue, we're now pushing 2.9. So we could either take, back off a little bit, but then more is going in there, or we could, in this case, we could put the super excess back in, and that all becomes surplus. And the way you justify it is, we can't just break even, because then how do we fund the next project that comes up, right? So you do want to run some surplus, and we can, show that we're accounting for some constriction due to, water conservation. So, I mean, maybe you put the super excess back in there, but don't, like you said, consider that, put that towards the surplus, not the mean budget. And maybe we can back off this a little bit. We could do some sort of analysis and say, we think, we see, a constriction of X in water usage as a result of rate, the excess, and then again, for super excess, to kind of take into account the fact that you would expect some of that usage to go down. And that way you don't feel like you're accounting for revenue that you're not going to see. And then it doesn't look like, we're carrying an excess because we're greedy. We're carrying an excess because we don't think this will be fully realized, because we have decades of experience that show that people will conserve water when rates go up, right? So it's a reasonable assumption that it's not gonna be one-to-one.
Yeah, you're showing surplus, but in reality, they're gonna knee-jerk and pull back for about a year and a half.
How did you figure the basic? What we used to do is we used to take the residential rate for the basic charge, and then take, like if it was a two-family house, we would take half that basic charge and charge it to the next unit. So if it was like $50, it would be $75 for a two unit, $25 for that second unit.
Yeah, so your structure is like that currently, and we match that.
Okay, then the third, if you have a three, then you'd be $25 more for the third unit. The fourth, you'd be $25 more.
Yeah, so
That's how it was
that's actually
set
what
up.
this
I think
column-
he just added, for this scenario, he just added to it to.
Yeah. You
So
said
this
that
shows
was-
exactly that. This is showing that, this is just something I did to make sure we were doing it, so. You're
People
showing-
who used to come in and argue about it, their argument was that their tenants can't possibly use that much water. We used to cut their basic amount that they're allowed to down, cut it in half. But the argument was, because the landlord had to pay the water bill, they were getting a big bill. But they were saying the tenants couldn't use their basic amount because they're just tenants. They don't water the lawn or anything like that, only the landlord does. So they said their water usage is just inside the house. So, if the water usage went over that amount that we cut in half, then they get charged excess and they have to pay the extra. But we had
So
people-
that is, this is showing that's exactly what it does. It's 2 unit is 1.5 times and then the same thing, then a 3 unit is double a single unit, and a 4 unit is 2.5 times a single unit. And we matched that. So like, if I'm telling you the truth, then when we come down here, we'll see.
If,
Yeah, so you can see the percentages still line up pretty well.
Okay, and then the condos, like the business condos, we did the same thing. They were handled, that there's one unit that waters the outside grass and does the outside stuff, and then there's, each one got a lower rate, but they were just hooked into one bathroom and no showers and stuff, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one thing we have to look at if we put the super excess back in. We did it as a flat rate. But as you can see, the excess allowed, we do keep proportional based on, so you see they have, Esta Drive gets much more of an allowance than a single residential does. And I think by doing that, we would have to make a similar concession if we put the super excess back in.
Right, well, then, those are apartments there, so.
Yeah, so maybe we look at, like you were saying, 1.5. If we look at how many units there are,
Yeah.
we wouldn't give them an excess of, 4,000 times 100 units, but maybe it's, 50% of that for each unit.
but then Esther Drive, and you're saying their basic is based on the number of units, the same way the,
Yeah, so the base and the excess for those are, as far as we can tell, proportional. But it's based on the same percentage that the existing area has. But we took a look at it and they seemed in line. So unless you guys are finding that those, they're not paying their fair share now, then under these scenarios, that doesn't get better or worse. It's proportionally the same. The only place it was inequitable was in the super excess. So I think that's an adjustment that needs to take place if we put that back in.
so jumping the basic, the what you did with that basic residential, the 100.
Yeah.
That would get us to 39% of, that was a number, would be 39% of the
The revenue.
revenue would then be coming.
But
But of course, that's based on all this additional expense that we've got sitting in the budget. It's not like it's doing that just on the basis of what's going on now. This is covering a lot of additional work, additional expense that's gonna be coming down the road.
With all the inflation we got, this is great time, and I'll tell you, people are gonna love this.
Yeah, we're paying this for the same inflation
I
too.
know,
Yeah,
man,
like
I know.
my KOH went up $10,000 in one fell swoop. It was
Yeah, wait till we get the electric bill with the 60% or 65% increase they're gonna give us. Electric bills here are gonna go through the roof.
so it didn't change just by as much as I was expecting, but all I'm showing here is 42% of the revenue to cover the budget would be coming from the base. And the so all I'm trying to show there is that under this scenario, we're running a surplus, right? So if you just look at what percentage of your budget is covered by the base, it's 42%.
Okay.
That makes sense? Am I explaining that?
And that was going from, that's 55 to 100. Right, we're 50 foot.
Yeah, so essentially,
So essentially from going by and doing the others proportionally, but by taking the single family residential and from 55 to 100, we'd be going from roughly 38% now of revenue to 42% revenue.
from 30.
I think it said 38 in the beginning, what we're at, that's what, because that's where we're at now.
Yeah, I think it was 32 before we touched anything, and now it's up to 42. Is that what you-
Well, I thought you said 38 and 62 was current base to excess. Was it 32 to 68?
I think it was 32, 60.
Okay, yeah, say, okay.
I could just hit undo a whole bunch of times to find out.
Or if we go,
But I could probably just reopen it, not
Yeah.
save my changes, but.
This is the water department in West Bridgewater?
they're trying to sell you health insurance.
So I guess there are a couple places we can go next. With the rate study, like I mentioned, we have a couple things, before I got into the spreadsheet, there are a couple things we think we need to do, tighten it up. I don't know the right timing for that, if you want to try to get a better handle on some of your funding. I don't know how soon you're looking to do this, but, the sooner they go up, the sooner your revenue goes up.
Well, we're gonna, realistically, I think we need to start something, not necessarily a jump like that,
Right.
in fell
You
swoop,
don't- No.
but start something sooner rather than later to be getting at least to start moving the base in the right direction.
Yeah.
So if by tightening it up, we could come up with a better idea of when the projects might go to construction. Because like you said, for something like that, you go through your pilot, things have to get approved through DEP, everything kind of goes. It's a couple-year process before you're into construction.
Yeah.
So to sort of figure out when these numbers actually need to be hit.
Yeah, we can take another look at it, because you're right, we did that a couple months ago.
I think
Yeah,
that's the
that's
way to go.
That's what this is showing, right?
As we start this
Because
process,
that's showing when the things are done, based on as far as the budget number.
This is showing what we think the budget is gonna be that year.
What year?
So,
You say
20
When we're bonding out for everything,
yeah, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, so like,
So the number we were talking about with the 100 and, with what you just put in for the numbers.
about $1 million.
We're looking at that $1 million hitting in 2025 and 2026.
Yeah.
Not next year.
Right.
So the numbers we're playing with here in that spreadsheet were really what we're shooting for 2025 or 6.
Exactly.
So a 3-year process,
Right.
process to bring up the thing.
So as he's got the dates up there, we should be just trying to raise those rates to hit those targets of those years.
I agree with that. I
Yeah.
think we should go up in increments, especially if we do get.
We should send a letter on the
Yeah, 'cause
bill
if you get
to explain that to
forgiveness, then
people, what's going
not
on.
gonna look, it doesn't, and there's no way to tell.
Right.
That's why I kinda asked, there's no way to tell until you're in it.
There needs to be a letter that goes in the bill or something, explaining what we're doing between now and 2026, so that people understand, they see their rate increase,
Right.
they're gonna see a rate increase the next year, and they're gonna see a rate increase the next year, and they're gonna see a rate increase in 2026.
Right.
And we just give an idea of what percentage by 2026 that their increase will be from now, like if it's
Oh, why
60 or
damn well, line it
70%.
up right now?
Well,
I mean, we need to give him an idea, but I think too, we need to really try to pin down the next couple of years so we know where to start going with them, with what we hit them with.
well, people out there want us to build these things.
Well,
They're all gung ho when they say build them, but then they don't wanna pay for them. So they gotta understand, if you're gonna push us to build them, we'll build them, but don't be surprised when you get the bill.
You can't even really say they're pushing. I mean, this stuff down here, we need to do it. The state changes the regulations, you have to meet the regulations.
And they're
Right.
gonna change it. It's
But I mean, there's a lot of
Not
people, a lot of people were coming into our meeting telling us that we needed to build that treatment.
Yeah.
They're worried about drinking that bad water and they were,
Right.
you know, so, oh, okay, we'll build it, but you don't complain when you gotta pay for it. So, I mean, we didn't put the chemicals in the water. So,
Okay, so like with the SRF, January, they should know about what the program, they'll know
Yeah.
if.
It
if
might
we
be
get-
sooner, I'll look it up.
But like, if we'd be approved, and at the same time, you'd know if it's gonna be principal relief
Right. 'Cause that
or
makes
not
that'll
before,
make a huge
because they have to
difference.
make the app, so we know before we have to do the application if
Right.
it's principal or not.
And it makes a difference whether it's the Sears Street Norman Ave plant or if it's the Manley that gets selected or both,
Yeah.
right? Because this is gonna be the first expense, because like we talked about, we can kind of, you know,
Mainly should be able to
push it out a bit,
as
because
long
you're gonna
as,
have treatment in,
Right.
you're going to be in compliance, you are now, but you're gonna continue to be in compliance with improved, you know,
Right.
water quality. We think for multiple years, based on, you know, especially since we did all of our calculations, you know, assuming you were at that 21 number, and we're down,
Yeah.
even though it's up a little bit, we're still at 14, that's a significant, and it's proportional.
and that increases the life of the media.
Exactly, proportionally. So if it's a 33% drop in, you know, influent PFAS, that's a 33% increase in media life. So if we thought you were gonna be somewhere around a year or two, you just, that's, you know, 6 months we may have just, you know, got, just because those levels went down. Not even taking into account that, you know, the estimates are probably conservative and that those estimates are to 50% breakthrough, not complete failure, you know, so it's,
Right.
you know, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, we get that vessel up and running, if we're in compliance for, you know, many years. It's just a matter of, you know, at what
Convincing.
point does DP say you need to get the redundancy in? Or, you know, if we have a year of data showing that our influent is in compliance and that this treatment is a bonus, not driven by
Not
permits,
mandatory, yeah.
then it's a completely different conversation. Like, then you might want redundancy just, but maybe it's on your terms.
Which means we could potentially put that off indefinitely while we're paying for the other stuff or until some other things come off.
Yeah, and you just prepare that maybe part of your budgeting is for a media replacement, so that if this media does hit, you know, 50%, you know, breakthrough, you know that you're halfway to using your media, you know, and you've budgeted for a replacement, which is certainly less than the cost of the plant. And if you never have to replace the media, then it's,
Right.
you know, it's still there. But then that, you know, if you show that you can fund a media replacement, maybe that buys you a little bit more wiggle room to needing to add the redundancy right away.
Yeah, because what's driving a lot of this is all the additional $1 million a year in revenues for all this construction.
It's, yeah,
And that, if we can take that, cut that way
Cut
back,
it in half. keep
yeah,
a lot
that's a big difference. So
Big
it's the
difference.
best, I don't know, a best guess on scheduling for what goes out, as far as, you know, making sure what we're planning on schedules makes sense. I mean, the Manley Street, that's kind of a finger cross
yeah, I mean,
that we can just kind of hope on.
yeah, so that's just collectively determining what is our risk threshold on planning for that, right? You know, we're assuming worst case, I think we're all in the room thinking worst case is not the most likely, you know, path forward. so maybe we meet somewhere in the middle between what we're calling worst case and what we think is the case, and there's still some, conservation built in, but it's not as aggressively conservative. Is that making sense? Kind of.
Well, if we're too conservative putting the rates up in the beginning, and then we don't wanna cause more pain than we have to generate it, so if we're generating revenue that we don't need for a couple of more years out,
It just means,
that's.
because we're talking about a stepped approach anyway, so if we not accidentally, but like if we inadvertently create more surplus in the first round than we thought, we know eventually it's gonna catch up. It just means the next bump is pushed out or is less. Because the rates need to go, you haven't raised rates in a long time, so even with,
2016.
2016,
Yeah.
because we didn't meet our revenue.
yeah, so that's a considerable amount of time. What other bills have they had that haven't gone up since 2016, Because your costs have gone up since
The
2016.
cost is spiraling now.
Yeah, so even without construction, I think you're due for,
Even if you did two $5 bumps spread out a bit, it begins to bring them in or get you closer.
Yeah, we gotta raise it up. It'd be nice to be able to raise it up slow so we can not hurt them too bad.
yeah. So, I think that kind of, we're closing up the asset management contract. So I think it's a matter of kind of looking at what we want to do with rates moving forward. We can continue to work off, the spreadsheet if you want us to do, a proposal to do a more, do that next step if we do, dive into all those things. The schedule I owe you anyway, so that's obviously not something we need a proposal
Yeah.
for. We can define that. If it's, minor tweaks to this, we can make that happen too. It's just if we're gonna kind of continue down the path of, in-depth analysis, we maybe submit a proposal for that. And then the nuclear option is we can actually go to a firm that specializes in, rate studies and finance, and you can, we have that as a sub to us to do some of that. That's, if you wanted to go kind of all-in, long-term look. But for now, what I'll do is I'll get a schedule of, an updated schedule of when we think things are gonna happen, maybe with, an early start and early finish, kind of a thing to show you the range of possible, outcomes to say, like for Manly, for example, if we assume that after a year, DP is gonna say like, okay, where's your pilot report? That's worst case. But if we think it's gonna be, 2 years before we have to construct, I can have a schedule show that. And then maybe we just kind of regroup at that point and figure out what we wanna do moving forward.
But at least to have a good, something we can figure is a reasonably solid number, set of numbers going out, so we know what the targets are. We can play, I think we can play with the numbers on the spreadsheet level pretty well as far as opposed to going the full nuclear option that we're talking about. At least until we have an idea, you need to know what's going on with the SRFs.
Right.
You wanna talk to town hall about the bonding,
Yeah.
and the loans, because our previous guy there used to do a good job of getting better rates, I think, than you'd get under the
Yeah.
SRF and stuff. He
And
was,
Scott still does a good job.
Scott does a good job too, so, we'd wanna talk to them about that before we.
Yeah, Sean Duggan used to get us good rates,
Yeah,
especially
Sean.
rates were lower at the time, but, yeah, he used to get us some real good bank rates that were better than what we could get through the, the
Yeah.
state.
But yeah, I think we'd probably wanna use Scott as the, sounding board on that too, maybe to go over with
Yeah.
how to finance some of this stuff and what we could expect to be paid
Yeah,
out.
because those assumptions can make a difference too.
Yeah.
If he can finance at better terms than we assumed.
But you have to go into the application to find out if you're gonna, and you can walk away.
You can always walk away. That's why we said, just let us do it.
Yeah,
for you.
it doesn't hurt to put it in,
Right.
but then at least we have some numbers. Then once we have that idea, just on the spreadsheet basis, at least to get us going. It's minimal effort, but it'll give us a decent idea of what we hit with so many dollars maybe a 5-year target is to be what we were talking about, but we bump it up, a fifth or a quarter of that a year.
Right.
So we're not, or maybe we have to go up quicker, or maybe we can go easier and then hit it later on in the year.
Yeah. I mean, if you want,
That should come out of the spreadsheet fairly easy.
yeah, and well, if you want us just to run some reports and send back to you to look at your top users and, take us out of that, and if you wanna take it closer to the budget without us, then certainly we can provide you with any and all of this, so, so that we're not the ones, doing it. We're happy to do as much or as little to get you to the finish
Yeah.
line.
All right, well,
So when do you think you could have the, updated as far as the schedule and
Today's Monday, we can get you something this week.
so before the next meeting, would be able to have that we can take?
Won't be a problem. Like I said, we internally have all of these dates in mind.
It's just put-
We put them in
They
writing.
published them before.
Yeah, it's just maybe, now we know the exact, well, not the exact, we know the right month that the pilot's gonna study, so
Yeah.
before we were saying fall, 2022, now we're gonna say it's mid-November, 2022, and so it's, I don't think we're wildly off, but we can dial in because we're further along. So we can certainly get you.
And then we can discuss what we wanna do as far as when we wanna do the first increase and how often we wanna do them.
I feel like we're in agreement that we wanna stay away from the super excess.
Or if we use it, make it so it's gonna be, I think, a small amount of customers that would hit it and almost make it as it's a punitive thing, not as a budgetary thing. So that if DEP gets really heavy on this stuff, they've got a real incentive to actually listen.
Right.
Then you're not reliant on it for your.
Yeah, but yeah, you can't rely on it for revenue because it's just gonna be too, somebody gets that big a bill, they're gonna shut the sprinklers off,
Right.
if that's what's.
Yeah.
And you,
well, that's
realistically, you don't wanna kill somebody if it's somebody's toilet running.
Right.
In the end would probably end up forgiven.
Yeah, you probably
Okay.
bait that first
Yeah.
one, right, and then.
Yeah, so then, again, you can't rely on it because
Because it's not
you're
revenue.
right.
gonna abate it. Maybe we do something else a little bit different with the excess, the regular excess rate, and put a little more into that,
Mhm.
switch a little of that percentage, but, we need to get the base amount up. I think that's a big, going forward, it's gonna be a big deal.
Yeah.
And now you said that was up to 42, the last thing you played with, so that's going in the right direction.
Yeah. And it's like slightly, it's an improvement over current situation.
Other places you work with, you have an idea of where their base covers for their
I mean,
buildings?
we aim for much higher than that, right? We try to be, 80-90% of the base. But
Realistically, municipalities, though, are you seeing that, or?
I don't know, I can talk to Jenna. She's done rate studies all over New England. She might have some actual numbers we can look at, because that's what she looked at when she, when we did our internal review to make sure what we're presenting made sense. In the past, she's been parts of regional studies. There's a firm out there, I can't remember who for a while put out data on what rates looked like, and so I know she's reviewed that in the past too. So she might be able to give you a little bit of color to what those communities are seeing, what what the industry as a whole, what are they actually achieving, right? Because we all know what we want to do, but I don't know realistically what we're seeing.
I was curious.
This is a good question. All right. Anything else for me tonight?
I got a question for you. Any money out there for solar, for the water departments?
I'm not sure. Let me. I'll ask around. You know, if nothing else, I can ask some of the subs who do a lot of our electrical design and would be plugged in.
Because we got what's our electric bill now? 80,000 a year, 90,000?
Yeah, somewhere in the 75 right there, but obviously we know that since they've been allowed some increases, it's
going
gonna
up.
be
And
up.
we got a lot of land out here that we could,
Yeah,
a solar field there, we could put one over on Sears Street, Norman Avenue. You know, there's lots of area here where we could, and we could feed it directly into the pumping station, so we don't even have to put it out to the grid and then buy it back, we just directly feed. We could even go in time and put batteries in and, you know,
Yeah.
feed off the batteries when
If you
we
don't wanna
use
go
it.
out to the utility, you would have to put batteries in,
Yeah.
cause you
Yeah.
wanna be able to run
No, I
those
mean,
pumps
feed it
through.
out to them, but if you can store it, you can use a lot more. It's better if it never leaves the property.
Yeah,
When
but you gotta be able to store enough from when you're not using it, to make
Right.
sure you can keep things going.
Right,
yeah, right, because that's the benefit of the grid is you can run a surplus in the, you know, summer and a deficit in the winter, and the credits you gain come off your bill in the winter. If you're doing it all,
yeah, the electric company figured that one out, though. They paid everybody for their, extra electricity that they created all summer long and fed into the grid. They paid them at the lower rate. Now they're gonna raise the rate
well,
65%.
yeah, they're
Now
they're
that,
always
now
gonna
when you
win.
buy it back, you're gonna pay
They're
65%.
kinda like the government, they don't lose.
Yeah, they don't, yeah, the house never loses.
Yeah, well, if we had batteries, we wouldn't have that
It does
problem.
help, yeah.
And the water department is gonna be here forever. When we're not here anymore,
It's still here.
the water department's still here.
Mhm.
So if we create our own generation plant out there, it's gonna be here for a long, long time.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, makes sense.
and they just keep producing, they just keep producing. And the way I look at it, you build one so big this year, you can always add on to it. And, you know, if they, you know, and change out the panels after they get to be 25 years old, if they're sliding off in production and that, you just throw new panels on.
And even if all it is, you know, the savings, especially the way the rates are going, gonna be large enough that even, you know, you want funding, but even without funding, it's gonna get to a point it's gonna be worth it
Yeah,
to do this stuff. Because it is, the bills are gonna get out of this world.
Here.
I believe the town locked in our rate for 3 years at 11 cents. So we have till then.
When did the lock start though?
I believe you have till November to sign up for it.
yeah, it's still a hefty bill.
If you didn't take yourself out of it, you're automatically enrolled.
I have to ask you about that. But I mean, that come for the, like, for the water department type bill roll for that, or is that?
I know that the selectmen did it last year, and with the rates changing, they opened up a window for people who opted out to sign back up. And that's ends in November, I believe. So, locked us in at 11 cents a kilowatt, I think.
The biggest downfall I see in being a municipality and doing it is you gotta pay the prevailing wage to build something that
Mhm.
the regular public can do a lot cheaper,
That's true.
just because they can just use it like a regular electrician's rate rather than the prevailing wage rate.
Yeah.
Makes those panels a lot more expensive. Payback gets a little longer, but it's still worth it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys giving me so much time. It was, I think it was good to get your
So I
feedback.
wanted you to come in and try to, specifically for it, because we figured it was gonna take a little bit.
Yeah, no, it was great. I think it was a good conversation, so I appreciate it.
All right, so you're gonna send us something so we'll have for next meeting?
Yeah, like I said, I think we can get the schedule updated, this week. And maybe what I'll do is I'll just plug it in so we can see if that shifts at all, if those years, if it pushes out those budgets at all. Give send to both of those things on too.
Yeah, and then at the next meeting, we can look at that, and we can start talking about, how much more we might want you to do and what we wanna look at. And
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, we're happy to do as much or as little, whatever works for you guys. We just want to help you get across the goal line.
Well, I'd like you to be a little more involved so we have somebody to blame.
Okay. I could be a fall guy.
You laugh, but the company I used to work for years back, we lost a big client up in Maine. The main reason that happened was because of rate increases, and we took the blame for the rate increase.
Oh, yeah.
And all we were doing was following the main DPU requirements for how things were being charged, and it started a whole big mess, and we ended up out.
Okay. So maybe I'll take that.
So you want to be a little careful about
You can put
it.
that in the meeting.
You want to come up with a way to keep, it down as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are, right? That's why we spent so much time looking at it, is I think we all recognize that it's a big deal. We want to make sure we do it right.
Do we need James for anything else in the old business?
Oh, yeah, is there anything we didn't touch on yet?
Yeah, we
haven't touched
actually
on-
touched on a couple of them.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming in.
Well, I'm happy to stay and go over the next couple if there's
Okay.
something we didn't touch on. Absolutely.
So, Wayne, do you wanna just go over?
So I think he touched on 1, 2, and 4, because he talked about, they're gonna be here piloting probably at the beginning of November or the end of October. We're next in line. Station 3, he talked about how the DEP had some things that they're working with them on.
Yeah, we're just gonna try to see if we can soften some of what they're asking Wayne and company to do with compliance. That's, in our opinion, not really related at all to what we're doing for PFAS.
And then the replacement well, the electricians, they did tie in the well. It's tied in electrically out there. They're supposed to be here tomorrow, and the next day I think they're gonna start running the pipe to where the VFDs are supposed to be, so that they're prepping for it. I don't think they have the VFDs yet.
No, I don't have a delivery date for the VFDs yet, so
Right.
I'm worried it's not gonna be this year.
But now with that tied in, you can run the well,
Yeah.
and you
So-
started running to waste to get the samples.
Right, so I'm working through that with, I've asked them some questions about the sampling and.
Why is there such a big lead time with those things? They're made in China or something?
The VFDs?
Yeah.
I don't know by those specifically, but yeah, we're getting 6, 9, 12 months on some of these things, lead times. But I mean, we approved that shop drawing a while ago.
Right.
So we're well into
Sitting in
that
a
wait.
container ship off the port of San Francisco somewhere, right?
Could be
now,
that.
Waiting for a place to offload.
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing 18 to 24 months on generators now, so,
Yeah, I've heard generators are way out.
yeah. I think there's a chip shortage, so we've had other.
There's a
places-
what shortage?
Chip, like
Oh,
microchips.
chips,
Yeah, if you look inside a
So-
VFD, it's nothing but chips. It's-
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we've had
but
PLCs
one of
on
the
delay.
political ads they've been running lately, though, has been saying that they passed some law that makes all the chips
Yeah,
are made
that's
here
right.
again, and the prices of cars and stuff are coming
Yeah,
down.
that's
Yeah,
like-
Cutler.
I thought they solved all this. You mean that's not true?
Yeah, like I said, it takes forever.
You mean a political ad isn't true? I don't remember which candidate it was that this is for.
Yeah.
But they
Well, it's
made-
big in cars too, right? I think
Right.
that's Toyota was saying that hundreds of thousands of vehicles that are just sitting there they can't sell because they're waiting on chips.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Ford
thought
has
Ford
that
was-
too.
yeah.
Or maybe it was Ford.
It's
Maybe it was
Ford.
both.
Yeah, they basically make them, and they have to wait for chips.
They're actually shipping them with, parts aren't working. You get them, like your environmental controls, parts of it aren't working until they get the chip and can put it in.
You know, country used to work like with supply and demand. If there was a big demand for something, somebody else got in the business and they produced more of them and the price came down, and it doesn't happen anymore.
No, but I think they were saying with the chips that realistic, there's like 2 companies, period, in the world.
Yeah.
And it's every place that they make it is, you know, they might have different factories elsewhere, but there's only like a couple of companies that make
Right.
the real high end.
Yes.
So, yeah, you kind of,
That could be what
Kinda
it is
stuck.
on the VFD.
Yeah, and China's trying to control them all.
Yeah, and I mean, they're not always off the shelf either, so, you know, these are VFDs with bypass, so that if the VFD fails, you don't lose the well. You can put it in bypass, and so those are, I think, a little bit more expensive and more lead time than
okay.
other VFDs.
But still not even a date yet.
Not last time I talked to Paul, I don't know if he had an update for you this week, but I asked Paul probably 2 weeks ago, and he didn't have anything yet. And our focus lately was lighting a fire under their behinds, just get out here and make the splice. That was, I'm sure you've heard, it was
Oh,
a
yeah.
nightmare, just getting them out here to do that. And some strongly worded emails.
So what else is,
So the only other thing would be, the
Walnut.
park house. Walnut Street, I don't think.
Oh, right,
Walnut
so,
Street,
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, thank you, I forgot about that one. So, we got in a little bit of a log jam with our modeling license. We couldn't run our models, and we were stuck in like a 2-week line to get through to the developer. So we lost a couple weeks of modeling. So I think we're back up and going, and we were scheduled for our project to have the modeling software this week. So I think we should have kind of some news go into our internal review within a couple weeks. And then our internal review usually takes a couple weeks to kind of go through tech review. So I think we're probably a month away from being able to deliver something on that.
But you'd already set up the EPS on that, it was a matter of.
It was-
Starting to go through and do confirmation runs, or?
Yeah, so
what's this for Lincoln?
this is for the
Walnut Street
yeah.
tank to be able to do
okay.
the altitude valves down at Spring.
Yeah, so we already
Okay.
had the pump curves, like we got all the pump curves in,
Yeah.
we got the dynamo flow curves in, but when it came time to like run scenarios, actually run the model and view the output, that's kind of when we got stuck. So,
Yeah, so it's basically ready to go, you just hadn't been a chance to run to do the confirmation,
Yeah.
make sure that the tanks are tracking and things are working the way they're supposed to.
right, we wanna see that what we're getting matches the
Yeah.
experience we have before we start making decisions on you know, what we're gonna do about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're a little behind on that admittedly, but I don't think there are any roadblocks moving forward.
Problem when you have to run through the internet to run your software, and they can shut you down instead
Yeah,
of owning
and
the software.
Justine, who manages our modeling, she could talk your ear off about it, but they convinced us that we had to upgrade our license. And then as soon as they had our money, like 2 months later, like, oh, actually, we're moving to a subscription-based platform. It's like, so we didn't need to upgrade. We could have waited 2 months and
Right.
just got bought into the subscription
Yeah.
with unlimited updates. So, so we've had some battles with them. But what else are we gonna do? It's a service
Well,
that,
that's the thing, what made you stuck? You had
Yeah,
your
right.
platform.
it's
you
one of the
use.
things we're, really skilled at in the industry is, our modeling, our capital efficiency planning, and, to do that, we gotta be able to run all of the different, programs, so that whatever the town or city uses, we can model their system, so.
So a month out, to
Yeah.
do something.
Yeah, so maybe not this next board meeting I come to, but the one after that, I would expect to have something to report.
That should go back into the agenda then, probably, Gary.
Yeah, because I noticed this
That-
time.
that- I noticed it wasn't on old business. We took a couple of things off old business
What, the
last
Walnut
time.
Street tank?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that might have just gotten taken off by mistake.
yeah. And I think that covers everything you can escape.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm not in a rush to get out of here.
Oh, I know, it's, after that's the Lincoln Street warehouse, and I haven't heard anything more now.
No.
It's,
No. Whatever he's doing, I see some emails going back and forth about plans, but it has more to do with everything else than us.
did they even try to get a road opening permit?
I have not
Trench
heard
permit or
anything.
anything yet?
I-
You see it if they ask for a trench permit.
Yeah, cause I'm gonna have to sign,
Yeah.
I'll do the dig safe, but I haven't seen anything for that. So he's kinda went quiet again.
Well, thanks again, I appreciate
No,
it.
thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Get a whole meeting between now and the next meeting if you missed anything. Have a good night.
You did.
And then the job posting, I don't think I've seen anything in a while now. And then, so the pump replacement for the Parco, so, you know, I started with the instrument guy, I had the Parco guy out here, and, you know, I worked with him today, and we troubleshot our way through to find out that it's in the motor control center, the overload relay burnt out.
So it wasn't the Parco
It was
itself?
not the Parco itself. So what he did was today, we jumped the overload, which it's okay, we're not gonna run it. We ran it today so that I could pull samples so I can qualify it. So today we got our first samples out of it. Tomorrow, the electrician, so I also learned that the electrician that I use for my VFDs and I use is not tied to the people doing our other work. Somehow I thought he was with them and he's not. So that's a good thing. So he's coming out tomorrow. I sent him pictures because he's trying to come out with the part if he can. So he never told me whether he had enough information, but there's no tags on the thing, you know, the thing's been sitting out there from whenever. There was no tag or serial number that I could give him to show him what it was. But I gave him enough pictures so he might have been able to identify it.
So that might be backup and.
Yeah, if it's not, if you can't do it tomorrow, as he said, it's like a day. Hopefully it's a part that's an in-stock part. Because it really doesn't have any chips in it, it's just a relay.
One of the problems that I always ran into, whenever I built a pumping station or something, it was always the low bidder would get the job. And then he'd be scouting around trying to find the cheapest electrical supply house to give him the materials. And we ended up with one station with one brand of motor starters and relays and all that stuff, and this station is talking to that one, and then all the relays and everything down there are different brands, so when something burns out, now you gotta find where to even buy that thing, so the electricians say, I don't know, I gotta find out who handles these. And so what I was trying to do was just go with Square D and put that in the contracts, that they had to use Square D parts. Didn't matter, you know, what contractor got the job or whatever, but just try to
Try to
make it all the
standardize.
same, you know?
Right.
Because we'd be waiting, I remember having this one go down for some foolish relay, and we waited months for it. Nobody could find it, and then it was on back order, and that was before any of the, you know, the problems we have now. I can't imagine what it would be like now.
Yeah, I don't know, all I know is it's coming tomorrow, and he said if he had the part, then it'd be tomorrow, and if he doesn't, then it'll be the next
And
day.
it's just a replacement, it's not.
Yeah, and it's just a replacement.
All right, anything else?
No, that's about it.
Next meeting?
Monday, November 7th.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.